Got it. No pictures. The 2026 season hasn't even begun, but the battle has already started. Not on the track, not in front of the cameras, but deep inside the engines. Mercedes has built something powerful, something clever, an engine that could give them a serious advantage over the rest of the grid. And now, the other teams want it stopped. So what's really going on? Every Formula One engine works with something called a compression ratio. Before fuel ignites, it gets squeezed inside the engine. The tighter it's squeezed, the bigger the explosion, and the bigger the explosion, the more power you get. The rules are clear. The maximum compression ratio allowed is 16:1. That's the limit. Every team must stay within it. Here's where things get interesting. The FIA checks this number when the engine is cold, sitting in the garage, switched off, at room temperature. When they test the Mercedes engine like that, it shows exactly 16:1. Completely legal. No problems. But Mercedes found a smart way around it. They used special metals inside the engine, materials that expand when they heat up. So when the car is out on track, when temperatures rise and the engine is running at full power, those parts expand. And when they expand, the compression ratio increases. Not 16:1 anymore, closer to 18:1. More squeeze, more combustion, more power. How much more? Around 0.3 of a second per lap. In Formula One, that's massive. It didn't take long for the other teams to notice. Ferrari, Honda, and Audi went straight to the FIA. They argue that the limit should apply at all times, not just when the engine is cold. They want the compression ratio measured when the engine is hot and running. If that happens, Mercedes' advantage disappears instantly. And here's the twist. They reportedly learned about this from an engineer who used to work at Mercedes. Then there's Red Bull. They're not as far ahead as Mercedes with their engine development. If the loophole is closed, they don't lose much. Mercedes, however, loses a lot. So Red Bull sided with Ferrari, Honda, and Audi. 4 out of 5 engine manufacturers now support changing the rules. That's enough to win a vote. Mercedes stands alone, and that's a difficult position to be in. Toto Wolff, the boss of Mercedes, is not staying quiet. He says rival teams held private meetings to target Mercedes. He insists the technology was developed openly and discussed with the FIA throughout the process. To remove it just before the season begins would be a huge blow. Wolff has made it clear Mercedes is ready to fight back if the rules are changed. But there's also talk of a short-term solution. Mercedes receives its fuel from Petronas. One idea is to slightly lower the energy contents of the fuel. It would still be legal, but it would reduce some of the extra power gained from the compression trick. A temporary fix while the FIA decides on a permanent solution. And here's the key point. Even if the rules change, this is not the end for Mercedes. Their engine is still strong. The change would reduce their advantage, not eliminate it. They would remain one of the fastest teams on the grid. We already saw signs of that in Barcelona. Mercedes completed over 500 laps in testing. Russell set the fastest time. The car looked smooth, balanced, fast. Even Russell said it was probably the quickest he's ever seen a Formula One car through that circuit. The season hasn't started yet, but the fight already has. And this battle could shape everything in 2026.
That's a bold claim, because even without the compression ratio advantage, Mercedes still looks strong, very strong, which makes the timing of this controversy even more critical. Pre-season testing in Bahrain begins next week. The first race in Melbourne at the Australian Grand Prix is only about a month away. The FIA does not want to arrive in Australia with uncertainty hanging over the championship. They want this resolved before the lights go out in Melbourne. But changing regulations isn't simple. There has to be a vote. And even if the vote passes, Mercedes can challenge the decision. This could drag on. And there's another layer to the story. For 2026, Formula One moves to 100% sustainable fuels. These fuels behave differently, they burn differently, they interact with the engine in new ways. Some engineers believe the fuel itself could matter even more than the engine design. During testing in Barcelona, many teams were cautious. They stayed with the older 2025 fuel. They didn't want failures, they didn't want surprises. Mercedes didn't hesitate. They ran the new fuel confidently. That tells you something about how prepared they are. For Scuderia Ferrari, this fight is personal. They haven't won a championship in years. Starting a new era already behind on power is not an option. Honda, now powering Aston Martin F1 team, wants a fair fight from day one. And Audi, still building its Formula One future, needs a level playing field more than anyone. That leaves the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile in a difficult position. On one hand, Mercedes found something clever within the written rules. On the other, the sport must stay competitive. Nobody wants to watch one team dominate because of a technical loophole. The decision made in the next few weeks could shape the entire 2026 season, and right now, all eyes are on the FIA. Because this is how Formula One really works. It's not just about speed on track. It's politics, alliances, strategy away from the cameras. Teams talk, they form groups, they push for changes that help them and hurt their rivals. That's always been part of the sport. And right now, Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team finds itself on the wrong side of that game. But they've been here before. In 2014, when the hybrid era began, Mercedes was miles ahead. Other teams pushed for regulation tweaks then too. Mercedes stayed on top for years. Team principal Toto Wolff understands this game. He's played it before, and he knows how to respond. So don't count Mercedes out just yet. The next big moment is testing in Bahrain. That will be the first time we see every car on track together under the new regulations. By then, we might have clarity on the compression ratio debate.